Hi everyone, this is just a quick video looking at formal and informal writing. Now this is a really key element when you look at the functional skills course because it is something that helps build the kind of understanding that you need to pass both level 1, level 2 and also have a good understanding of English as a whole. So if you're an ESOL learner, this will also help you as well. We're going to think about how this has a big impact on our writing, and we're also going to have a little look at a few reading questions as well. So it should cover a lot of the skills that you need to do well on the course. What is formal and informal English? So first of all then, when we think about formal English, this is language that is characterized by the use of standard English. Often they use more complex sentence structures, infrequent use of personal pronouns, and lack of colloquial or slang terms. So a quick and easy way to think about that is that formal English, formal language, this is the kind of thing that we're going to use for typical things like if you are applying for a job, if you're writing to an organisation, a business or an MP. It's a more professional tone, so this is really important that when you look at your writing questions specifically, you're aware of the kind of tone or the kind of language that you'll be expected to use in your writing. Next one then, so what is informal English? So informal language is more casual and spontaneous. It is used when communicating with friends or family, either in writing or in conversation. It is used when writing personal emails, text messages, and in some business correspondence. The tone of informal language is more personal than formal language. So I've actually got some key points here to actually be aware of in terms of when to use formal and informal English. And if you actually look at the box on the right, it actually says there that you use it when you're writing personal emails. So if we're talking about personal emails, this is where you might be asked to write to someone that you know or have a long-standing relationship or history with. Obviously in English, in the functional skills course, you won't be expected to write text messages. And when it talks about business correspondence, yes, you can sometimes use informal language in this, but it definitely wouldn't be for anything like communicating with someone that you don't already know. So if you're applying for a job, you definitely want to make sure that you're using formal language. When it says that you might use it for business correspondence, it might be communicating with your peers or co-workers that you have an existing relationship with. Now this is really important that you understand the difference between formal and informal language, because if you use the wrong one, it can really affect the way that the audience interprets what you're trying to say, and it could come off as being overly aggressive or even rude, and it's not really going to give your words the most appropriate kind of effect that you're looking for. Look at the following words and match them to the correct definitions. So here what we have on the left hand side are very typical colloquial or slang terms that are used in kind of everyday English within the UK. Now some of these are what we call dialectic terms as well, so they're terms that you might not be familiar with, but it might be that in certain areas of the UK they tend to use these kind of words. You might notice that when for example, several different regions within the UK have a different term for things like a bread roll. It can be called a bap, a batch, a roll, lots of different things like that. So when we're talking about these kind of words, we mean the kind of words that you don't usually use in formal conversation. They're ones that we use in more informal standard English as well. So the first one then, leg it. This is a very kind of colloquial term, often used by young people and teenagers. It means that when you run very quickly, usually in order to escape from someone. These are really good things just to learn, because it just helps improve your English generally. So if your English is a second language, you might not have come across these terms before, but they're really good to know just to help improve your general understanding of English. Next one is dodgy. So if you deem something to be dodgy, it means that you might think a person might be dishonest or unreliable, and it also can apply to other things as well, not just people. All gone to pot. Now what this one means is when something's gone wrong. You might have had something planned out and it hasn't met the expectations that you set out for, so therefore it's been ruined or has failed. Gobsmacked. Now this is a really good one to use when you're showing a sense of shock or surprise over something. Again, these are not terms we would use in formal writing, but these are the kind of things that you might hear day to day from native English speakers. And the more you kind of get used to these kind of things and how they're used in specific situations, the easier it's going to be to understand certain conversations, but also how to use some of these words when you're trying to construct your informal writing as well. If you think this is something that you're quite interested in, another thing to think about is trying to stretch and challenge yourself and think, what impressions do you get from each of these words? What did they kind of initially make you think of? Why is formal and informal writing important? We're going to go through this by looking at the typical exam question. Now, the exam question is often hard enough, especially when you've got the nerves, a sense of anxiety, because a lot of us have a lot of things riding on our actual exam response, so it can be a little bit nerve-wracking for us to go into an exam. It's really important, therefore, to start breaking it down as soon as you see your exam question. So if we look at the one below them, your friend is thinking about going to college next year. Write an email advising them on the next steps after secondary school. Now, it's important to note that with this question, it hasn't actually stated directly whether your writing needs to be formal or informal. But if we start piecing it down, start breaking it up a little bit, we can think about the kind of tone that is appropriate for this question. So first of all, one of the things that is relevant is that you're writing to your friend. So if you are writing to a friend, we can assume that that is a close relationship that you have, and therefore you can speak informally to that person. The next thing is that we need to think about the type of form of writing that you need to produce, which is an email. So what you should be thinking about this is, how do you lay out an email? What kind of presentation or organizational features do you need to use in your writing? These can either be formal or informal, so it's also important to read the question very carefully. The next bit, which tells us a little bit more about it, is that you're advising them. Now, if you're giving advice, that tells you about the kind of tone that you need in order to be successful in answering this question. When we're advising someone, we mean that you have to be gentle, use a nice kind tone, and you can also use that colloquial language or slang, as we looked at in the previous part of the video, because it's a real good way of breaking down barriers and helping build some connections with people. So if you use the same kind of language with people on a subconscious level, you're making connections with them and you're connecting with them on an actual language level as well. And that can help build relationships and make your writing and your ideas more kind of palatable to their imaginations. Look at the exam question and consider the key aspects of the question. So now we're going to focus on a specific writing question, and this is a typical one that is actually used often for mocks, so it is very likely that you're going to get a scenario like this. Now, first of all, what you're going to be faced with is a task. So task 1 is going to come with a bit of information, and this is a bit of a background information regarding a scenario that they might want you to write about. The one that we're going to focus on today is as follows. Many organisations require their staff or students to wear a uniform, where others ban certain haircuts and have strict rules about tattoos and piercings. Do you think this is fair? Should everyone be allowed to look the way they want, or does a dress code encourage a professional approach to work and study? You decide to write an article about dress codes for your workplace, or your school, or your college magazine. Now, first of all, if we have a look at this information, it's very important that you take your time and you understand specifically what they want you to focus on. And they really do give us quite a few things to think about for this question. The main focus of the question needs to be understood, so we need to be thinking about the TAP, so the topic, the audience, and the purpose of the writing. So we know that looking from this information, that the main part of the focus of the question is going to be about this word here, which is uniforms. It also gives you a few ideas about the kind of things that you can start thinking about to help respond to this question. So it mentioned things like uniform generally covers clothing, but it also goes a bit further and it mentions things like having haircuts and strict rules about tattoos and piercings. So really it's quite broad with the different things that you could write about. Do you think it's fair? Let's focus on the word you here, and that is telling us very clearly that they want you to express your own opinion about this topic. It also goes further to get you to try and engage with the question a bit more. So should everyone be allowed to look the way they want, or does a dress code encourage a professional approach to work and study? Now this is a really good question to practice because it is one of those ones that it doesn't matter which side of the argument you might fall on, you probably think a little bit of both, especially when you consider this word here about a professional approach. So it's very applicable to the fact that we're doing functional skills. It's all about getting those skills to help us move on into a professional setting. The final thing for the information that we need to think about here is that it is about an article, so that tells us the form of the writing it's going to take and the kind of organisational and presentational features we need to use, and also the fact that it's going to be a school or college or workplace magazine. Now this means that you're going to be writing to your peers, and with that in mind you can use colloquial or slang language or more informal language. It shows that you're reading the question very carefully and that you understand that this is going to be something that is going to be read by people of either a similar age, education or profession to yourself. Now let's look specifically at the question. So the writing task. Write an article to give your views on dress codes. Again, that was already kind of explained in the information on the left hand side. In your article you should. Now these bullet points are going to be very important because the examiner is actually giving you a lot of support and guidance on what they think a good response should include. So outline the dress code at your workplace, college or school. So this is where you're allowed to be quite personal and you can talk about the kind of rules or regulations that is in the organisation that you belong to yourself. The next one. Explain the arguments for and against dress codes. Now if we're talking about for and against, that means that we are allowed to give a balanced argument. So I would personally underline the idea about for and against. And a real good thing to do to actually present a balanced argument is to think about using things like discourse markers. So words like on the other hand, however, in addition, in contrast, things like that will allow us to talk about different sides of an argument. And finally, give your opinions and persuade people to agree with you. You should aim to write about 250 to 300 words. If you think back to the previous task that we did, it was looking at writing an email, giving some advice about the next steps in someone's future career or education. So advising was actually quite gentle, but here we're actually asked to persuade. So we also need to bear that in mind because what we need to do now is think about using our persuasive techniques. You should aim to write about 250 to 300 words. So again, this is very typical of the functional skills level 1 and also level 2, where you'd be expected to write somewhere about nearly half a page, maybe a little bit more than that. When you're writing this in an exam, it's important that you get a rough idea of what that kind of looks like before you do the exam, rather than spending that time literally reading every single line and keeping account of every single word that you've used. That's really going to eat into your time in the exam. And really you just need to make sure that you're looking over your work, you're assessing what techniques you've used, your spelling, your punctuation, your grammar, that it actually has a clear focus in each paragraph rather than wasting time and reading every single word to make sure you hit this word count. If you go a little bit over or under, that's fine, so don't stress about it too much when you do your exam. What is an article and what organisational features do you need to include? So the first thing that you need to think about is the headings. So this will be at the start of the text. It's also called a headline as well. Now this doesn't need to be the very best phrased word or sentence in the world. It doesn't have to have loads of deforest techniques in it, as long as it clearly states what it is that the rest of your writing is going to focus on. Next one, you need to use subheadings. Now these will be a fantastic thing to use to help actually organise and structure your writing. So each time you have a different paragraph, you can use a subheading to explain to the reader, this is what we're going to talk about, or this is what we're going to cover in this part of the extract. The main body. So the main part of your writing is going to form 2 to 3 main paragraphs, and each of these paragraphs need to have a very clear focus. If your focus changes, that means you need to move on to a different paragraph. And finally, for our conclusion, you're going to have an ending paragraph of the article with an opinion or a recommendation. So a good thing to do if you're writing an article yourself, you could put something like, if you would like to find out more information about this, then check out this website. And you could always make up a website as well, and that just makes it sound a little bit more professional and a little bit more sophisticated as well. Look at the student example and consider the challenges that follow. So it starts off then with a very clear headline, which is a fantastic way to start an article, a really good thing to include in terms of your organisational features. So does uniform really matter? How important are the things we wear? Are uniforms something that helps us to be better learners, or is it something that crushes creativity? Professional approach. I remember my first day at secondary school like it was yesterday. As I put on my blazer for the first time, I was gobsmacked. I felt excited and energised about the new academic year. My childish ways had been thrown aside, and instead I was taking the next step to becoming an adult. At least, that's what I thought at first. Now if we look at the challenges then on the right hand side. So the first thing I'd like to think about is, has this response used the correct presentational or organisational features that you'd expect for an article? The super challenge. Identify any language techniques used to express the writer's viewpoint. So again, we're thinking about our deforest techniques and any other language techniques that you might be aware of, or any other that you've covered in your normal lessons or in any of these videos as well. Mega challenge. Check your answers against the ones in the next part of the video. So if you'd like to pause it, have a look at this response in a little bit more detail, please feel free to do so. What we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and we're going to have a look at the actual teacher's comments for this response. Class feedback. Check your answers against the ones below. So just as we had before, we've got the same response over on the left hand side, where the person attempted the same question that we were thinking about earlier. What we've got now on the right hand side is a teacher who's actually given this proper feedback for the response. So you can see there we've got teacher feedback, and the first thing they're going to do is they're going to write down www, which means what went well. So for the purpose of this video, all we're thinking about really is the things that work well in it, the things that we want to identify for the positives, okay? So the first thing it says is the respondents used a heading and a subheading to organise their ideas. So remember, if you're asked to write in an article, you have to make sure that you're using things like a heading and a subheading. So we have our heading or headline there. Does uniform really matter? A nice little rhetorical question at the end as well. And then further down, we have the subheading, professional approach. And this has been used really well, and it helps us to know as the reader how the writer is going to organise their ideas and what they're going to go and talk about in the next part of this paragraph. Next one, the candidate has used rhetorical questions. That's a really good point. So we've used one there in the headline. If you actually look at the introduction, there is a lot of rhetorical questions. It even starts off with the very first sentence being a rhetorical question. And if we look, every other sentence in the intro also has a rhetorical question. Now it's really good that the candidate has started to use some of its deforest techniques. However, I will just say that when you're doing this, make sure that you're not using the same deforest technique over and over again. And this just makes sure that you're showing the examiner that you know how to use a range of techniques rather than just the one technique over and over again. The candidate has also used personal pronouns, so that is words like us, we, and I. Now, words like us and we have a slightly different effect to I. When we say us and we, it helps us actually connect with the audience really well, because it makes us seem like we're on the same side and we're all in this together. So it's a good one to kind of create a sense of unity. And if we're writing to people who we're either at college at, or they're our peers, or might know them in the workplace, it's good that we acknowledge that we are, all part of the same team. When you say I, you're talking about your own personal experiences. And when you actually put yourself out there and you express yourself on a personal level, it does make people think that you're, trying to get close to them and form a bond with them. And that is a really good thing to use in your writing, because it allows the reader to think that this person is trying to actually win me over and get me to, believe with what I'm trying to say. So it's a good technique to use. We've also used informal language. So if you think back to the first bit we were doing at the start of the video, we looked at this word here, gobsmacked, which of course means a great sense of surprise. So if you remember the actual focus of the question, if it was aimed at your peer group, people on a similar level to you, people that you have a relationship with, then you're allowed to use informal language. So it's really good because this is meeting the actual tone or the expectations of the writing task. And finally then, the last point that the teacher has made on this, it's used alliteration in their response. So alliteration has been used in the introduction as well, when it says crushes creativity. So you've got the repetition there of the C word. And alliteration is a really good technique to use because this helps us to emphasize certain words. And you can hear it when I say it, crushes creativity. It kind of forces you to say it in a little bit of a louder tone or volume. The response is clear and concise and matches the tone of the exam question. So one of the things that a lot of us do when we're quite nervous is we tend to just rush to get everything down, and unfortunately that can sometimes affect the structure of our writing. But you can see here that the candidate has thought very carefully about what they're trying to write, and they've expressed themselves in a very clear way. Now obviously this response is only a snapshot of what you would do in the exam. The exam asks you to write 250 to 300 words, so obviously this is a good start, but hopefully we could build on that ourselves. So what I'd like you to do, I'd like you to try and stretch and challenge yourself and use this example to start writing your own response. It's really important that you practice this as much as possible because the writing element of the exam is often the area that people struggle with the most. Now we're going to move on and we're going to think about building our reading skills. Now even if you've already passed this component, it's still really important that you go back and just revise and practice those skills for the reading assessment, because when you progress on to level 2 you're going to need it, and if you're going to go further and go on to GCSE English as well, it's really important that you build those skills. The main skills we're thinking about is being able to select and synthesize information. So whenever you're revising English, it's really important that you think about these things, because these are the main skills that you need to cover. So in order to actually improve, a good thing you can do is try to engage with a range of texts, so both fiction and non-fiction. So this means don't just read things like articles, blogs and newspapers, but also try to actually get some fiction books as well. This will help you to understand a range of different vocabulary, different English idioms and expressions that you probably wouldn't have heard in everyday English as well. Look up any new words to help improve your vocabulary. This is just going to help you to get more in tune with the kind of sophisticated words that we use, and also the slightly more obscure words that we use as well. And there are a lot of them in the English language, because when you think about how our language has developed, it really has been influenced by a number of different countries as well. So there are a lot of words there that people might not use in everyday conversation, but it's still quite important to understanding the language as a whole. Apply the new words to everyday conversations to solidify your understanding. So a lot of the time we get comfortable with certain expressions, and our conversations or even our writing tends to form around a similar kind of words or expressions, and that doesn't really help us to grow. So if you learn a new word, try it out, try using it in different situations and see if you can get a little bit more comfortable with using that word. And finally, practice skimming and scanning different forms of writing. This is a really good skill to get, because when you're in an exam situation, you're going to have to be able to select that information very, very quickly and apply it to the question that's been presented to you. Read the article carefully and be ready to respond to 5 quick-fire questions. So all we're going to do now is we're going to look at an example of an article. We're going to see how you can use the skills of skimming and scanning to select and identify key information, and see if we can practice some of our reading skills. So you can see there, it's very clearly going to be an article, because what we've got here is a headline. So that's a really key thing that you need to include in terms of your organisation or presentational features. So it says then, college or sixth form, The decision may be more important than you think. School leavers these days are faced with a series of important and vital decisions that will shape their future. With the dramatic impact brought about by the COVID-19 crisis, teenagers have had years of disruption, anxiety, and fear regarding the next steps they want to take in life. So what is the right decision? What should our young people do with so much chaos and upheaval? One thing is for sure. Young people need to think carefully about the courses and the schools or colleges that they entrust with their future. You can see here now, the next word we have is college, and it is in bold. That is because the writer has made sure that they're using the correct organisational features. In this case, it will be a subheading to help organise their work effectively. Freedom, independence, and standing on your own 2 feet. These are often the things associated with going to college. Learners are able to step away from their old lives and discover a new world of possibilities and uncover their true potential. These days, however, many learners choose to go to college because it is often seen to be the easier route to take in life. Many soon discover, however, that this is not the case. So if you'd like to pause the video here and read over this article in a bit more depth, that's absolutely fine. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start looking at the 5 quickfire questions based on what we've just read. Quickfire questions. Check your understanding by answering the questions below. So our first question then. Look at text A. What language technique has been used in the line years of disruption, anxiety, and fear? Now when we're talking about language techniques specifically, I'd like you to focus on the DeForest techniques that we've looked at in previous videos. If you're still a little bit unsure about that, please do go back and check out some of those videos. They do go into a little bit more depth because they are quite difficult to actually remember, though they're really important in your writing and your reading as well. Number 2, look at text A. What does the writer blame on the increased stress for school leavers? So if you want to go back, you want to check the source again, please feel free to do that. Number 3, look at text A. Identify 2 reasons why people choose to go to college. Number 4, look at the line, vital decisions that will shape their future. Replace the verb shape with another word so that the sentence still makes sense. Now this is a very typical question that you're going to get in the reading section for functional skills. If you'd like to use a dictionary or a thesaurus to help you with this task, that is absolutely fine. It's all about practice and getting used to using and understanding the different forms of language. Number 5. Look at source A. Do you think going to college is a good idea for school leavers? Select a quotation to support your answer. When you're answering a question like this, it's really important that you read it carefully. This question is actually asking you to do 2 different things, and the first one is asking you your opinion, and we can see that in the first part of this sentence. You can see with my horrible highlighting that's happening now. So it's asking us the question, do you think going to college is a good idea for school leavers? That's the first part, so you need to state your opinion. You then need to support your ideas by selecting a quotation from the extract there as well. Okay, so you can see there that they're asking you to do more than one thing. So typically a question like this is going to be worth at least 2 marks in the exam. So it's very important that you read it and you understand exactly what the examiner is requesting of you. If you'd like to carry on practicing your reading skills, because I know some people do struggle on this a little bit, then please feel free to download the additional questions on this topic to practice your reading skills, and that will all be available in the description below. Class feedback. Check your answers against the ones below. So number 1. The writer has used a group of 3 or a triplet in the line years of disruption, anxiety and fear. Number 2. The writer blames the COVID-19 pandemic for the increased stress for school leavers. Number 3. Answers may include but are not limited to freedom, independence, and discovering new possibilities. Now, whenever we get a response where there's multiple answers, you might find this in the mark scheme. This phrase that says answers may include but are not limited to. All that means is that you might not have came up with one of the answers that's actually in the mark scheme, or in the actual ones that we're using in this example, but as long as you're thinking about the kind of words that are similar, have a similar meaning to the ones that are being presented, you'll still be awarded a mark in the exam. Number 4. Answers may include, but not limited to, decide, dictate, guide, etc. Number 5, last one. In order to gain full marks, the response needs to be expressed clearly, be written in full sentences, and make appropriate references to the text. When you think about a question like the one that you were faced with question 5, because it asks you to go a little bit further than the previous questions, you therefore have to write in more depth as well, and you will also be rewarded by more marks by applying that extra effort to these questions as well. If you need any additional help or support, then new videos will be added every single week. Alternatively, you can leave us a comment, like and subscribe, and we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you'd like to find something else that isn't available on our channel, then please do check out our partner channel, Bookworm Teaching, for more lessons and guidance on all things English. Thanks a lot for listening, guys, and please do keep on watching. It really helps us when you do. Thanks, goodbye.